Today I'll be taking you on a tour around some Western Australian mineral deposits that are remarkable for the diverse range of mineral species that they contain. To use an analogy with the biological world, they could be called mineralogical rainforests. The stops on our journey are the Telfer gold mine in the Great Sandy Desert, the Whim Creek copper mine and the Ashburton deposits in the Pilbara, and the 132 North nickel mine near Widgie in the goldfields. Rocks exposed at the surface of the Earth are subject to the processes of weathering and erosion, operating through the action of wind and water. In addition, exposure to our oxygen-rich atmosphere produces some interesting chemical reactions between the rocks at or near the surface and oxygen-rich groundwater, a process called chemical weathering. Some minerals break down and others grow, often completely transforming the exposed rocks in a blanket that extends from the surface to depths of up to around 150 metres. When this process of chemical weathering takes place in mineral deposits, for example deposits of copper, lead, zinc, nickel or gold, it can produce an enormous range of products known as secondary minerals that have diverse chemical compositions and are often of great beauty. Before we go too much further, I'll just explain a few useful concepts and terms. All matter is made up of atoms, extraordinarily small particles that we can think of in this fashion: a cloud of electrons surrounding a nucleus containing protons and neutrons. To get an idea of the scale involved, take a millimetre length and divide it into 1,000, and this is a micron. To get to the scale of atoms, take a micron and divide it into 10,000 finer widths. So the scale of an atom is 1/10,000,000th of a millimetre. And in the words of Bill Bryson, the nucleus of an atom is tiny, only 1/1,000,000th of a billionth of the full volume of the atom, but fantastically dense since it contains virtually all the atom's mass. If an atom were expanded to the size of a cathedral, the nucleus would be only the size of a fly, but a fly many thousands of times heavier than the cathedral. Now, if an atom loses an electron to a chemical bond, for example, it becomes positively charged, and we call it a cation. Iron, for example, in forming stable compounds with other elements, may take one of two oxidation states. Ferrous iron has donated 2 of its electrons in forming bonds with other atoms and is in oxidation state 2, or Fe2+. An iron atom may donate 3 electrons to bonding and is then in oxidation state 3, known as ferric iron or Fe3+. A reaction that causes iron to increase the number of its electrons involved in bonds with other atoms is called an oxidation reaction, as it increases the oxidation state of iron. We'll see an example of this in a moment. If an atom gains an electron, it becomes negatively charged, and we call it an anion. A reduction reaction reduces the oxidation state of an atom as it receives electrons through bonding. So all rocks are made up of minerals. Generally, these are inorganic compounds that have a distinct chemical composition and a distinct crystal structure. We see the example here of the iron sulfide pyrite that has a cubic crystal structure. The iron atoms are in red and the sulfur atoms are in yellow on the right there. Elements such as gold and copper also are minerals that crystallise in the cubic crystal system. Carbon also forms minerals. Graphite and diamond are the best known of these. Both are made up of carbon, but they have different crystal structures. Here's some sulfide minerals from the Kimberley in Western Australia, galena and marcasite. So what constitutes a mineral deposit? Metallic ores, as they're often called, are anomalous concentrations of elements, usually as compounds, which are economically favourable for exploitation. The base metals copper, lead and zinc have similar chemical behaviour and thus form similar minerals. Generally, they are recovered from sulfide ore deposits, where they occur as sulfides or sulfur salts, minerals in which the metals are bonded with sulfur. These minerals are found in the primary environment, or formed in the primary environment. that is at elevated temperature and pressure with respect to conditions at or close to the surface of the Earth, and is oxygen poor. Minerals formed in the primary environment, often at great depths in the Earth's crust, are unstable in other environments, notably at the surface of the Earth. Volcanism often provides the heat source for mineralisation in primary environments, driving systems of circulating mineralising fluids. Other sulphide deposits, such as the nickel deposits around Kalgoorlie and Kambalda, precipitated directly from molten magmas. An example of a volcanic mineralising system are these ocean floor black smokers, where sulphide minerals are deposited on the seafloor from heated brines at temperatures of around 200 to 300 degrees Celsius, in what is obviously an oxygen-deficient environment. The primary ore in the Whim Creek deposit probably formed in a similar seafloor setting. What's called the secondary environment refers to the top few hundred metres of the Earth's crust, or commonly less, far removed from the primary environment conditions. And the temperature and pressure in the secondary environment deviate little from atmospheric conditions. Oxygen is abundant, water is freely available, and sulphur is stable principally as the sulphate ion, SO4 2-. In the majority of cases, the elemental constituents of primary minerals are present in unstable oxidation states relative to their surroundings. With passage of time, they react to form other more stable phases. So the stabilities of chemical compounds or minerals are directly linked to the environment in which they formed. And on this slide, we've got an example of the oxidation of pyrite to form iron oxides, hematite and goethite. The change in oxidation state from Fe2+ to Fe3+, and you can see the cubes in the bottom right there, iron oxides replacing the original cubes of pyrite. This next diagram shows a schematic section through an ore body exposed at the surface. And this shows the oxidised zone that contains residual resistant minerals and the products of the decomposition of sulphides and associated primary minerals. And the groundwaters in this region are charged with a range of metallic cations and various anions shown there. And these groundwaters percolate through this zone. And new minerals may be precipitated from these groundwaters, the secondary minerals of the oxide ore bodies. And they're bewildering in their complexity. So there are about 5,000 mineral species known at the present time, and around a third of these are found in the oxide zone of sulphide ore bodies as a result of these reaction conditions. And about 40% of the new minerals that have been described from Western Australia have come from the oxidised zone. Also shown there is a zone of secondary enrichment just below the water table. It's also very important. Secondary sulphides such as chalcocite may be formed here. And we'll see some beautiful examples of chalcocite from the Telfer gold mine in a few moments. So the first stop on our tour is the Whim Creek copper mine in the Pilbara, and it's situated just off the highway south of Port Hedland. About 42 minerals from the oxidised zone have been described from Whim Creek, including the only Australian occurrence of murdochite. So the Whim Creek mine was discovered in 1887 by the prospector Philip Saunders, and first mining occurred in 1889-90. And there's been sporadic production since that time, mostly in the years 1906 to 1924, and more recently from 2005 to 2009. And the primary ore body at Whim Creek occurs in the ancient rocks of the Pilbara Craton. It's a strata-bound deposit that formed in a sequence of sedimentary and volcanic rocks on the seafloor around 3,000 million years ago. There's a view out across the Whim Creek mine in 1911. And again in 1985. So this is the Whim Creek Hotel, and the mine's situated just behind it, just off the highway south of Port Hedland. And most of the WA Museum collection of Whim Creek minerals were collected in 1985. And here are some photos from that collecting trip. So that's the entrance to the underground workings. I think that's an area underground called the ballroom. And here they are collecting a few of the specimens. So the people involved, there's a couple of them there. David Vaughan is one of our museum honorary associates, and I think it's Sheena Elliott as well. So here's a list of some of the secondary minerals from the Whim Creek mine. Just to note that you have a whole range of cations and also a whole range of anions as well, sulfate, arsenate, iodide, and vanadates and molybdates. So in particular, the lead molybdate wolfenite, for which the mine is famous in mineral collecting circles. So here's a picture of some wolfenite and the workings underground, little orange crystals studding the wall. And here we have some malachite pseudomorphs after azurite. That's in situ in the area called the ballroom. It's another nice example of malachite after azurite. There's some balls of malachite, and zooming closer in, we've got these lovely little bow ties of pyromorphite and pseudomalachite. So the pyromorphite, which is a lead mineral, has been capped by little pseudomalachites at the end. So the pseudomalachite is a copper phosphate, and the pyromorphite's a lead phosphate. Wolfenite is one of the most spectacular minerals occurring in the mine. Wolfenite crystals may be up to 9 millimetres across, but it more commonly occurs as 1 to 2 millimetre crystals scattered on and contrasting effectively with dark brown to black goethite lining solution cavities. So it's generally pale yellow to orange, and crystal habits vary from tabular crystals up to about 9 millimetres wide to tetragonal bipyramids, up to about 7 millimetres long. Some lovely orange bipyramids. There's a tabular crystal of wolfenite up to about 4 millimetres across. Some green pyromorphite with tabular wolfenite. Just as a bit of an interlude, this is a scanning electron microscope, which is very important to this sort of work, looking at really small crystals. This is one at the CSIRO here in Perth, and basically what happens is a beam of electrons is scanned across the surface of your sample, and you get electrons scattered back, and these are used to form images of the crystals that you can see at very small levels, small scales. And so you get some pretty lovely pictures like this. This is a bladed faunicite with tabular wolfenite crystals and tiny acicular mottramite. Again, the faunicite and mottramite. This is all from Whim Creek. And also there is some pyromorphite. Some other SEM images of, this is a wolfenite crystal that's grown around a ball of malachite from Whim Creek. Again, showing some of the bipyramidal wolfenite crystals, more of a tabular wolfenite crystal there. And just to finish off, we have a wolfenite studded with tiny crystals of murdochite, just showing the chemical microenvironments involved here. That murdochite is very rare and generally only occurs on the surface of wolfenite. So moving along to the Telfer gold mine in the Great Sandy Desert. The Telfer gold copper mine is about 485 kilometres southeast of Port Hedland. And so there was some speculation at the time of its discovery that it was the lost reef of Harold Lassiter. It's proved to be one of Australia's largest gold deposits, producing almost 6 million ounces of gold from the start of mining operations in 1977 until 2000. It's best known among collectors for its world-class chalcocite specimens. The oxidised zone of the Telfer deposit also contains a diverse range of secondary minerals. Some of the oxidised zone material was collected by the museum associate David Vaughan in the early 1980s and preserved in the mineral collection of the late Blair Gartrell. And a large proportion of Gartrell's collection was donated to the museum by Mark Creasy in 2003. And so the Telfer gold deposits occur within a sequence of Proterozoic marine sedimentary rocks within the Paterson province, adjacent to the eastern edge of the Pilbara Craton. This next slide shows the geology of the Telfer mine. And so in the mine area, the sedimentary sequence is composed of interbedded quartz, sandstone, siltstone and mudstone. And folding of the sedimentary rocks has produced the Telfer Dome, a northwest trending doubly plunging anticline. Mineralisation occurs in a series of gold-copper bearing horizons or reefs. And the Middle Vale and E reefs have been the most important historically. They're now mined out, but they're the source of specimens in the museum collections. And the reefs consisted of thin sheets of quartz pyrite, chalcopyrite mineralisation, or their oxidised equivalents. And oxidation and supergene enrichment of the primary sulphide mineralisation, in which the pyrite was completely replaced by chalcocite, increased ore grades up to 90 grams per tonne gold and up to 20% copper. Here's a list of sulphide minerals from the Telfer mine. Most notable here, of course, is the chalcocite. Here's a lovely group of chalcocite crystals. It's about specimens about 1.5 centimetres across. And so at least several hundreds specimens of single chalcocite crystals and crystal groups were collected during the late 1990s from the Telfer mine. The specimens rival those from classical localities such as Red Ruth in Cornwall, England, and the Bristol Copper Mine in Connecticut in the US. So the specimens I'll show you over the next little bit. They range from single or composite crystals up to 6 centimetres long to clusters of crystals up to about 6 centimetres across. And so cruciform twins and interpenetrating crystals are common, and some prismatic crystals have arrowhead terminations. It's a lovely group of chalcocite crystals. That's about 4.5 centimetres long. It's a group of interpenetrating crystals of chalcocite with cruciform twinning. It's a group of chalcocite crystals, and some have this cruciform twinning associated with calcite, and the largest crystal there is about 1.5 centimetres long. Another group of chalcocite crystals, about 2.5 centimetres across. And this specimen consists of numerous thin tabular crystals of chalcocite encrusted by colourless calcite crystals on matrix. And the field of view there is about 5 centimetres. There's a list of the oxides from Telfer. You get some quite nice examples of cuprite. And here it's associated with chrysocolla. There's some of the carbonates and sulfates. Here we have some globular masses of malachite on pale blue chrysocolla, and intergrown with dark grey cuprite in parts. And that field of view is about 20 centimetres across. And again we have malachite associated with chrysocolla. Here are some not quite nice orange barite crystals on matrix, and so the crystals are up to about 6 millimetres wide here. But the Telfer mine also contained quite a wide range of what are called arsenates, and you see a list of them here. I'll just go through and show you a few of those. This is some olivenite associated with chrysocolla. So they're the olive green acicular crystals up to about 2 millimetres long. That's the olivenite. And here's an SEM image showing the overgrowth by chrysocolla. Another arsenate is cornwallite. It's a monoclinic mineral, and it's dimorphous with cornubite. Dimorphous means that it's got the same chemical composition as cornubite, but has a different crystal structure. So generally the cornwallite forms dark green hemispherical to barrel-shaped crystal clusters, generally less than 1 millimetre diameter on matrix. And these crystal groups are composed of elongate bladed crystals that appear to form length parallel twins. It's another mat of dark green cornwallite coating the cavity surface. And here we have an SEM image showing cornwallite associated with cornubite in this case. And so there's a large cylindrical group of cornwallite crystals at the centre of the view, associated with fibrous bundles of cornubite crystals, example to the top left of the cornwallite group, and also associated with minor fibres of agardite. You have some integron bundles of cornubite crystals on cornwallite, now associated with some fibres of agardite as well. So the cornubite is triclinic. More cornwallite and cornubite. We have some cornwallite on matrix. This is a hemispherical group of twin cornwallite crystals surrounded by tufts and fibres of agardite. So the agardite is that pale green colour. They're generally quite fibrous and sometimes form mats on mineral cavity surfaces. There's an SEM image showing some agardite sort of radiating hemispheres of this fibrous mineral. And so Telfer also contains copper and gold. And here we have a branching copper nugget. It's about 11 centimetres long. These are some native copper pseudomorphs after a cubic mineral. The field of view is about 4.3 centimetres there. Here we have black tarnished dendritic native copper on quartz, and the field of view is about 2.5 centimetres wide there. And under the SEM you can see the branching sort of structure of the copper, one of the copper specimens. And so we've also found some lovely examples of gold crystals at the microscopic scale on the Telfer specimens. So ideally formed gold crystals are rare. Natural gold crystals tend to be distorted. Their cubic symmetry is often indiscernible. Typically gold forms skeletal crystals, sheets, wires and dendritic or fern-like aggregates. And twinning plays an important role in the origin of gold's diversity of habits. This flat group of gold crystals here shaped like a Christmas tree. And the field of view is about 440 microns wide, so less than 0.5 millimetre. Here we have a complex network of gold rods, wires and tabular to octahedral crystals. Another group of bladed gold crystals on iron oxides on quartz. We have a lovely complex network of gold rods and tabular crystals on quartz. And this is slightly larger. The field of view is about 1.25 millimetres wide. You have some more tabular gold crystals encrusted by very fine-grained gold balls and crystals on quartz. And you've got gold encrusting quartz in the background there as well. Another nice group of gold crystals. And here they are situated next to a tuft of agardite, the arsenate mineral. And here is a group of very small gold crystals and rods. Nice group of tabular gold crystals. And then just to finish off, I think this might be the last couple. Get these lovely group, looks a bit like cheese. So that's the Telfer gold mine. And so we'll just move along to the Ashburton Downs deposits in the Capricorn Range in the Pilbara. So over 80 different species of secondary minerals have been discovered in the Ashburton deposits. And mineralisation has been known there since the early 1960s. There's been minor work, but no large-scale mining there. Here's a map showing the location of the Ashburton Downs and the bit of a simplified geology there as well. So basically consists of sedimentary rocks, the Capricorn and Ashburton formations of lower Proterozoic age. And the mineralisation occurs in a west-northwest trending anticlinal structure. And the prospects shown there are situated along a sheared fault zone. And so at the anticline prospect shown there, the average width of the shear zone at the surface is about 1 metre. And secondary ore minerals occur along the shear zone, frequently in cavities, and generally the secondary minerals are form very small crystals. This is a view of the Barley Low deposit in 2005. And so the primary sulphide minerals in the Ashburton deposits consist of arsenopyrite, pyrite, marcasite, galena and tetrahedrite, as well as tennantite and chalcopyrite. So that primary mineralogy is dominated by sulphides and arsenoids of lead, iron, copper and zinc. It's more of a close-up view of that hill at Barley Low, and looking in on the right-hand side you might be able to see a greenish patch of rock there. That's a boxwork after tennantite, which is a copper arsenic sulphide. And it's been replaced by secondary minerals including olivenite, chenovixite, morbiite, gartrellite, mimetite, arsensumabite and some alunite minerals. Here we are doing a bit of mineral collecting in 2005 at Barley Low. And this is a view of the Barley East deposit. So in underneath that ledge there is where all the secondary minerals have been uncovered. And this list just shows some of the diversity of secondary minerals from the Ashburton deposits, and the large variety of secondary minerals indicates complex weathering history for these deposits, with many changes in equilibrium conditions. And the fine grain size probably indicates a rapid dropping of the water table, allowing insufficient time for large crystals to grow from solution. And so the Ashburton deposits are the type locality for ashburtonite and gartrellite. You can see them listed there as well. And so obviously some of these minerals are quite colourful. Here we have images of ashburtonite, the lovely blue. Metazoonarite, there's a copper uranium arsenate, yellow on the right there, some corite on the bottom left, and labethanite is a copper phosphate on the bottom right. Now this is another group of cornwallite crystals, and this time from Barley East. Got that Very interesting sort of stacked crystal morphology. Again, cormalite from Barley East in the Ashburton deposits. And now move along and look at some nickel deposits. Well, in particular, the 132 North nickel mine near Widgie-Multha. But I've just listed there some of the other nickel mines in Western Australia that have produced a lot of rare and unusual nickel minerals. So this map shows the location of the 132 North mine near Widgie-Multha. And so the 132 North mine has produced the greatest variety of secondary nickel minerals found anywhere in the world, some being the best examples of their species. It's the type locality for Widgie-Multhalite and hosts second known occurrences for cambalderite and nullarbonite. So about 20 secondary nickel mineral species have been discovered there. And some 11 of the 16 new minerals described from the oxidised zone in Western Australia come from nickel deposits. The 132 North deposit, the primary ore consists of a small komatiite-hosted nickel sulphide deposit that's around 2,700 million years old. And the primary sulphides were pyrrhotite, pentlandite, chalcopyrite and pyrite. And the supergene profile, or the weathering profile at the deposit, is the product of weathering since from at least the Permian to the present. And also, the 132 North is also the type locality of Gillardite, and more recently another newly discovered copper nickel chloride. Here we have some examples of cambalderite from the 132 North deposit. And so the little bright green cambalderite crystals in the top left are about 0.8 millimetres in length. And here are some examples of the other nickel minerals from the deposit: annabergite at the top left, nullarbonite, nepoite and Widgie-Multhalite. We have examples of perchlorite and gillardite on hydrohonosite. So another photograph of gillardite. The crystals there are up to about 0.3 millimetres in length. And gillardite was described in 2006. It's actually named in honour of Professor Robert D. Gillard in recognition of his contributions to the field of inorganic chemistry. It's not named after our Prime Minister. And most recently, another new mineral has been found by Professor Pete Williams and his colleagues in Sydney amongst the copper nickel chlorides from the 132 North mine specimens in the museum collection. And a description of this should be published soon. So this is where we end our tour. Now, because mining is a destructive process, if deposits such as these are economic, then material from the oxidised zone will find its way to the crusher, and all traces of these mineralogical rainforests will be lost. That is, unless some finds its way into collections like the museums, where all sorts of startling discoveries can then be made. Thank you.